My name's Elizabeth Lawn, and we are going to start the OINP session right now for employer-based, the new employer-based categories, and we're also going to talk about the new skilled trades category. Now, I want to introduce to you Zia Sumar, who is another lawyer at our firm, who will also be here to answer your questions. So Zia, are you there? Hi, Zia. Okay, so Zia is going to be here and she's going to be answering your questions. But in the meantime, I'll have you log out, and Zia is going to log out, and we'll start our presentation right now. So let me just share my screen with you guys. And so today what we're going to talk about is the employer-based OINP that just opened last week, and the skilled trades category, which is also an OINP, that's a new category. Before I go on, though, I wanted to tell you guys that you can click on the Q&A right there if you have any questions throughout the presentation, and Zia will be here to answer your questions for you. So, the OINP employer-based. What is the OINP? Well, the OINP is the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. And what provincial nominee programs are they're programs that are specific to a province. So the province of Ontario has an agreement with the federal government to have certain programs where the province of Ontario gets to choose who is who is going to be the person who is going to get permanent residence. Let me just hold on for 1 second. Let me just see if I'm looking at some technical difficulties. Here we go. Okay, so now the provincial nominee program for Ontario includes a few categories. We have seen, and I've done some webinars before on the master's and PhD graduate programs. Those are now closed. But there are a few other programs. There's a entrepreneur program. We're not going to talk about that today, but that's also there as well. I've spoken before about other express entry based provincial nominee programs where the it's based on certain you have to actually enter into the express entry, and based on certain criteria, you might get a notification of interest. I've spoken about two of the ones that were there before, the human and capital priority stream, where if you have over 400 points, you might get a chance to get an invitation. And the French-speaking skilled worker class, where if you have really high levels of French, then you might also get invited. Now, today I'm going to speak on one more express entry category that just opened, which is the skilled trades category as well. And that is part of the express entry where you have to already enter into the express entry pool, and then you might, because of the criteria that you fulfill, you might get an invitation from the province to apply with them for 600 points and be able to get the invitation to apply. Above that, we also have the employer-based categories now, which I'm going to talk about today. And that is the one for the skilled workers class and the international students with a job offer class as well. So we will this is what we're going to be concentrating on. The green categories are what we're going to be concentrating on today. So there are new processes for the 2017 program. Prior to 2017, everything was paper-based. But this year, there's some new processes. And I've talked a little bit about this before in my previous presentations. I'll just go over it. So every year, the province gets a certain number of spots where they can nominate a certain number of people for permanent residence. It's not a lot. This year, there's 6,000 overall spots. There's 2,500 spots for express entry nominations. And the skilled trades category will go into that. And then there's 3,500 for other categories. So the employer-based categories that we're talking about, the master's and PhD streams, which were already filled up, the entrepreneur corporate, and then there's other applications from previous years that have not been processed yet. Everything now is an online system. Before we had a paper-based where you send things in by paper. Right now, everything is to be submitted online, and there are certain timelines to submit your application. You have to first have a profile, and then you're going to submit your application. For the skilled trades and the employer base is 21 days. Now the system, when you submit it online, they don't check whether or not you qualify. Afterwards, after you submit it, if you don't qualify, if there's anything wrong, they are going to return the application. And if the quota has been met, then it's going to be too late to submit the application. What the Ontario government is doing, because certain categories are filling up quite fast. For example, the master's and PhD streams filled up in a matter of a few days. Some for masters actually in a few hours. So what they do is they'll pause the program. If they filled up enough people, they'll pause the program. They may reopen it, they may not. Okay? So it's a first come, first serve applications. These applications are not selected out of a pool. These applications are, if you have created your profile and you've submitted your application, you've submitted your application. Okay, and the pausing of the programs is program dependent. So for example, the master's and PhD have now been paused, but the other categories are still open. So let's talk about the employer-based categories. We have, first of all, the international graduate category. And that category, to qualify, to be able to enter into this category, first of all, you must have graduated from a Canadian program of 2 years or more, or it could be a 1 year if it's a postgraduate program. What a postgraduate program means is that as a prerequisite to your program, you must have another post-secondary degree or diploma. So for example, a master's or PhD, but there are also college programs that are postgraduate programs as well. Now, to apply under this program and apply under the international graduate category, you must apply within the 2 years of your graduation date. Otherwise, you will no longer qualify for this, and you would have to qualify under the skilled worker category. The skilled worker category, to qualify for this, you must have 2 out of the last 5 years. So starting from the date that you applied, counting back 5 years. So for example, if we are applying today, we would count back to June 2012. And within those 5 years, do you have 2 years of work experience that's legal? It could be from outside of Canada, does not have to be inside of Canada, but it has to be legal. If it is in Canada, it has to be legal work experience with a work permit, or if it's work permit exempt, but it has to be in the occupation that you are applying for. okay? And right now, they are quite strict on looking at the work experience. They really need the employment offers. They really need to see the employment letters and tax documents to show, to prove that work experience as well. Now, other than that, we also have to look at the employer. So if the employer is in the GTA, is in Toronto, the employer has to gross income of over 1 million last year. Gross income is income that is before expenses are taken out. It's like gross sales, for example, okay? It's before your expenses, etc., are deducted. They have to have over 5 full-time employees who are Canadian or permanent residents, and they have to have been in business for over 3 years. If the employer is outside of the GTA, the gross income is over 500,000, and they only have to have 3 or more full-time employees, and they have to be in business for 3 years. So that's what the employer has to be in order to qualify. Now, other than that, you also need to have a qualifying job offer. So the job offer has to be permanent. The job offer has to be high skilled. So high skilled is defined as the NOC codes of O, A, and B. They have to be full-time. Full-time is defined as at least 30 hours a week. They have to have a salary, and the salary must meet, if you are a skilled worker, it must meet median wage. So oftentimes the median wage is, it can be hard to meet depending on how much you are paid. You have to be paid. The government does a survey of how much Canadians the Canadians in the occupation in the location where you are, how much they are normally paid. And so the salary cannot be below that wage. If it is an international graduate, it's a little bit easier to meet. It must be an entry wage. So the entry wage is for people who are sort of the juniors of that occupation, and the wage is much lower. And that makes sense because international graduates, you're assuming that you just graduated from school, you don't have that much work experience, okay? Now, recruitment. This is very important. We normally apply, we don't have to, we can apply for someone who is not already in Canada working in the job, but normally we apply for someone who is already working in the position. And if someone is already working in the position, then the employer does not have to show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. Let me repeat that. The employer does not have to show that they are not going to be working. It does not have to show that they can't find a Canadian who can do the job. That's very important because employers hate having to show that. And this is not a LMIA, okay? LMIA is something normally where an employer has advertised that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. If you're already working legally in the position with a work permit, employer does not have to do that. Okay, so what do we have to do in order to submit the application? First, we have to create a profile online. And the thing is, we want to create a profile online as soon as possible, as soon as we want to do it, because we want to hold your spot. Once the spots are filled, then they're going to pause the application. You have to wait until and if they reopen it again. So the first thing we want to do is create a profile. But before we create a profile, I have to make sure that you qualify because we have to submit the application within 21 days. The nice thing about submitting the current application, the rules for employer-based have not really changed. But what has changed is that the documentation in the first instance and the process has changed significantly. Prior to this year, to apply for employer-based, the employer first has to submit the application, and then after they are approved, then the applicant can submit the application. Now what is happening is everything is combined into one process, which will make things go a lot faster. So the employer also, in the first instance, they don't have to submit their corporate documents. What I mean by corporate documents is their tax documents, document like their lease, salaries of other employees. And that's very nice because oftentimes employers may be a little bit reluctant to show a worker, what kind of salaries other people are getting or their revenues, etc. Now, this is not to say that they won't eventually have to show the government these documents, but the government normally will come back afterwards and ask the employers to provide them with certain documents. The employer does have to submit an application form and attestation. So the attestation is where they say, well, yes, we qualify for this, this, and this, okay? And this is them swearing to the government, promising that they do fulfill the conditions. So this is something that normally with an employer, we need to speak with them and make sure that they do qualify, even though we don't have to submit all the documents ahead of time. And for this application right now, later on, we may very well have to prove this. The applicants, however, submit everything. So the worker, the employee, the person who is applying for the permanent residence will be submitting all of your documents at this stage. Okay? Now, after you get this, and I'm hoping that you will get nominated and get a certificate of nomination from the province, then what we can do with that, we can apply for permanent residence. Also, we can apply for a work permit. So if your work permit is about to expire, this will be very useful because you can apply for a work permit. It's going to be an employer-based work permit. You can only work for the employer, okay? But you can get a work permit to work until your permanent residence is approved. So the benefits of the employer-based application. People often ask me, well, should I apply for this? Should I apply for express entry? Is it worth it to do this? Well, there are a few benefits of the employer-based application. First of all, no English exam. This is one of the only ones for the economic-based programs in Ontario where you don't have to take an English exam, okay? The second thing is that you can apply. If you apply and you have a profile in there early enough before the program is closed or it's paused, then you can apply. It's first come, first serve. It's not like express entry where you put your profile in and you hope that you can get the ITA. There's a certainty there, which is very nice. And especially for people who you don't qualify for express entry right away, you have to wait for a year, and you don't know what the points are going to be like next year. Well, by applying for the employer-based now, you can be assured that at least you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You can actually, at least with this program, you can be able to get permanent residence this way. You can also obtain a work permit, especially for people whose work permits are going to expire in the next year. This is very good to allow you to continue to work in Canada for your employer while you're waiting for permanent residence. Okay, let's move on to the skilled trades category. So the skilled trades category is a express entry based category. And this is really for people who don't have enough points right now to get that invitation to apply. So let's just say I was a baker. Baker is one of the skilled trades categories, okay? And I have worked in Ontario for 1 year in one of the qualified trades in the last 2 years. So the qualified trades are very interesting. There are certain trades, the construction trades, mechanic trades, the bakers and the butchers are in there, but not the cooks. Cooks are not one of the qualified trades, unfortunately. Okay, but if I've worked in one of the if you are in a trade category, you can contact us and we'll let you know if you are in one of the qualified trades. It's too many for me to mention right now, but usually in the construction industry and the mechanical industry is what they're targeting. So no self-employment. You can't be self-employed. You have to be working for an employer who's deducting taxes for you and giving you that T4. It can't be while you're studying full-time in Canada. So for those students, it can't be that you work as a baker while you're studying. It has to be after you finish studying full-time. Okay? You have to pass the English exam, but it's much lower than it's a CLB of 5. Okay, normally to get an ITA, invitation to apply, CLB of 5 would probably be a little bit too low for you to get it. For CLB 5, you're looking at 5.0 in almost all of the categories, and for the IELTS and the CELPIP. There's one category which is a 4.5 or something, but it's around the 5 for IELTS and CELPIP, okay? And then you must have the trade certification if it's required for the job. If you don't need it for the job, it's not one of the requirements. For example, if I was an electrician, well, then there's a trade certification that I have to have. You can't work as an electrician without that trade certification. But if, for example, as a baker, there's no trade certification, so I don't need that trade certification there. The one critical thing is you must have a work permit to work in Canada, and you must be residing in Ontario at the time. They are not accepting implied status, where you've applied for a work permit extension, you don't have the work permit yet. So time is very, very essential in this kind of application. You cannot wait until the last minute, until your work permit is about to expire to apply for this. You must apply ASAP. You also need to have settlement funds to meet LICO. So you have to have enough savings in your account to meet the LICO standards. So normally for a single person, it's going to be around 13,000. With each family member, you're adding a couple of thousand to that. And, or if you have the settlement funds, or if you have a permanent job offer, it's okay as well. The applicant, so what happens is you're going to be in the pool and you're going to get that notification of interest to apply. You must submit your application within 21 days of receiving the notification of interest. So let me just go over quickly for those of you who don't understand, who've never heard of express entry, what express entry is. Express entry is essentially you have to qualify for express entry. You can qualify under the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or Federal Skilled Trades class. Once you qualify for that, you enter the pool, and you can get into, create an online profile, and you enter the pool. You can stay in the pool for 1 year, but the trick is not to stay in the pool. The trick is to get out and get an invitation to apply. What that is, it's an ITA. So what happens is once you're in the pool, you get a certain number of points based on your background, based on your age, language, work experience in Canada, education, etc. And so every 2 weeks or so, the government does a draw. Lately, it's come down to as low as 413 points, for example. So if you have 413 points in the last draw, then you would be able to apply. What the skilled trades would be good for is people who don't have that amount. If I have something in the 300s, my chances of getting an ITA is probably pretty low at this point. So if I have to be in there, and I can't apply right away to Ontario. I have to be in the express entry pool and hope that the Ontario government is going to send me an invitation. And if they send me an invitation, it's called a notification of interest, an NOI. And the Ontario government said, hey, you can apply with us for 600 more points. So then if I apply with the government for 600 more points, then I'm for sure going to get, and I am approved, for sure I will be able to get an invitation to apply. Okay? So basically, again, the score is based on the human capital score, which is based on your background. And then if you get a provincial nomination program nomination, because the human capital score is not high enough, but you get 600 more points, then you can actually apply. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the various programs. What should you do at this point? First of all, what you need to see is if the OINP is the right choice for you, and we can certainly go over that. Some of the things that we would think about is, A, do you qualify, right? I've talked a little bit about what you need to do to qualify, but there are a lot of criteria, and each person is different. So we'll do an evaluation and see if you qualify. Then we'll also look at, is this option the right one for you? Because sometimes there are other options that may be easier and faster. For example, the express entry for many people might be the better way to go because it's easier and faster. But for other people, you might not be able to go through the express entry very easily, and you might choose the OINP. You also have to understand that the employer-based applications that we talked about require you to work for the employer until your PR is granted. So what that means is that if you decide to stop working for the employer, and even if you have an OINP certificate and you're just waiting for your permanent residence, guess what? Your application can be denied because you stopped working for your employer. This is something that's nice for the employers to know, though, sometimes, because then they know they get to keep you for a year and a half or so while it takes to get the PR, okay? You should only really apply for this if you're going to intend to be in Ontario for the next 2 years or so, because Ontario, the provincial nominee programs, they very, very jealously guard who is able to who they're going to give the nominations to. They only want to give nominations to people who are going to be in Ontario. If you're going to manage, you want to move to BC, you want to move to Alberta, then if you do move there and you don't have your permanent residency yet, again, your permanent residency could very well be rescinded and you're back to square one. Second thing you want to do is submit your profile application as soon as possible if this is what you want to do. Because, like I said, the programs are now filling up very fast, and you might miss your opportunity if you don't do it as soon as you can. Okay, so I'm going to leave here our information for personal consultations, and we can go over your own situation. Everybody's situation is different, but we can also go over your own situation through our personal consultations. Just let us know, and we'll be glad to help you out. So now, let's see here. Zia, are you there? Hi, Zia. So, Zia, do you have any questions from people about this presentation? Sorry, Zia, we can't hear you. Let's hear you here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So we do have a couple questions that we've gotten a couple of times from. So the first one here is, do the 2 out of the 5 years of work experience, do they have to be full-time work?
So yes, the 2 out of 5 years has to be full-time work. That's not to say that you can't add your part-time work together to equal to 2 years of full-time work. For example, so full-time work means 30 hours a week. But if I were to work 4 years of 15 hours a week, I can add that together to be 2 years of full-time work. But altogether, it has to be at least 2 years of full-time work.
Okay. The next question that we're seeing is if you can talk a little bit about the, if you can go over the advantages and disadvantages of applying through the job offer category for international graduates.
Mm-hmm. So for the international graduates, what is nice about that is you don't have to have any work experience. So if, for example, you just graduated, you don't have any work experience, you wouldn't qualify for the express entry category, but you could qualify for the international graduate categories, right? So that's a very nice thing. Another thing is you don't have to do any English exams. And third is the certainty of being able to apply right now compared to next year. Last year, right now the points are very low, 413, very low. A lot of international graduates are able to apply. But last year, under the same government, it was at the 480s, and a lot of people were shut out. So we don't know what's going to be next year. Hopefully it'll be low, but how do we know? If we apply through the international graduate, this year you can apply right now, okay? The one thing that international graduates have to be aware of, though, is if you want to apply for this category, make sure you can work for the employer for the next 1.5 years or 2 years, because until you actually get the permanent residency, it's going to be, if you stop working for the employer, then your application can be denied. Also, we are not sure what the timelines are going to be for the international graduates. For the master's for this year, we've been getting applications approved in 5 weeks, right? Last year, it was taking over a year, sometimes 1.5 years. So for the international graduate, perhaps if they process the applications fast, then I would look at a timeline of maybe 1.5 years or so, because it takes around a year after you get the OINP approved. It takes around another year for the federal government to approve the PR. But what's nice about like I said, for the international graduate and all of the employer-based programs is that you get a work permit based on the approval there.
Okay. The next question is, what are the costs associated with OINP? Like, what are the processing fees for OINP?
So the processing fees for OINP, I believe, is 1,500. It may be 2,000. I have to double check on this.
Okay, so I'll go over it. It's 2,000 for any employer within the GTA. It's 1,500 for employers outside the GTA.
Perfect. Right. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. Thank you.
And how do people contact you for booking for a consultation?
So probably the easiest thing to do would be to email us at inquiries@lmlawgroup.com. I'll put this on the screen right now. And you can also call us as well to make an appointment.